Hey, Shalom, this is Dan, and we want to start a new book in the Torah with you today. We have already gone through Genesis, we've already gone through Exodus, we've already gone through Leviticus, and now here we are in the book of Numbers. Now, when you hear the word Numbers, in the English translation, the word Numbers, you think it might be a book that maybe it's as boring as what Leviticus is. But I gotta be honest with you, this is one of my favorite books. Now, Numbers, you think the word numbers, and you think, well, maybe you got to be an accountant or someone who likes math, a mathematician or something like this book. And while I do like math, and math was one of my best subjects in school, that's not really why I like the book of Numbers. In fact, the reason I like the book of Numbers is because it's here that you see what happens for the 39 years that they were in the desert. Now, you got 39 years. They've already moved into the wilderness, so we're going to be talking about things that happened through the Negev, through them going through Sinai, through the Arabian Peninsula, things like that. So they're in the desert. But it's in this time that what I especially love, and we'll talk about this more in the next couple of weeks, is you begin to see God weeding people out, but you begin to see people rising up and having passion. And that's what I love. I'm always one of these kind of people that I want to feel the passion of the Word. I want to feel, I want to sense the strong passion that people have for the Word, or even for their job. There are some people out there who I admire simply because, not that I could ever do their job, but because they are so passionate about their job themselves, that it makes me excited about their job for them. And so Numbers is my favorite book in the whole Torah. I would just put that out there for you. So if I get a little passionate, now you're going to know why. But let's talk about the name first, because in Hebrew the name is Bamidbar. Now, Bamidbar does not mean numbers. In fact, Bamidbar means in the desert. If we were to look at the first verse, and I've talked to you about this before, about how it's always based on the first couple words or the first word or so that you would find, and it's the same thing here. We're naming the book Bamidbar, in the desert. And here's what it says in Numbers 1:1. It says, Adonai spoke to Moses in the Sinai desert, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month of the second year after they had left Egypt. So we see this is all about that first couple words, in the desert. And we see that throughout the book, like we just talked about, it's 39 years of them walking around the desert. So the title Bamidbar, in the desert, fits. Now where do we get numbers from? More than likely it's because of the census. There are two censuses taken in this book, and we'll talk about those as we go on. But first, I want to kind of dispel a myth, because we hear quite often that the Old Testament is outdated, and especially that the Torah is outdated. But it's in 1 Corinthians 10 that Paul, and this is after Jesus has already come, so we're in the New Testament, but Paul here is relating something that he is realizing and learning. He's written it down in 1 Corinthians 10, but he's taking some of the instruction from what happens in Numbers. So it's quite a long passage. I want to read it to you, though. I'm reading from 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 to 13. Here's what it says. For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud, and that they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same food, the same spiritual food, and drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them. Their bodies were scattered over the desert. Now these things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and got up to indulge their pagan revelry. We should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We'll talk about that as we go on through the book here. Picking up here in verse 9. We should not test the Lord, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. Again, we'll talk about that in here in Bamidbar. In verse 10, and do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. Now I know that was a long passage there, But I want you to see that in that, Paul is discussing these things. He's in that final verse, and maybe it's sometimes taken out of context there, where he says that God will provide a way out and he doesn't tempt us and all. And it's true, God doesn't tempt us. But here in the Midbar, in Numbers, the people were making some bad decisions, and as a result of those bad decisions, God was having to weed them out. And Paul is warning us here in this 1 Corinthians 10 part, don't be like these people who they gave in. They did all these bad things, and as such, God had to keep wiping them out, wiping them out, wiping them out. And Paul's warning us, don't be like that. This is not time for us to do that. This is time for us to stay with what God has given us. It's time for us to keep in that order that God is placing, that canopy of safety and blessing that comes from standing under His order and His obedience. With that said, let's look at what happens here, because God puts order into place. We jump into Numbers 2 and we find that God again is establishing order, and He's arranging the tribes. And you've probably seen some pictures, and it has like the in the middle there's the tent of meeting, and then there's all the camps that are spread out around it. Now, I don't know how much research you've done on this chapter or this book at all, but let me just kind of set the stage here for you as to where each tribe was. So, first of all, you got the tent of meeting in the center of the camp. All right, now we talked about this before. The tent of meeting was to be the center. It was supposed to be in the center for a reason, because we are supposed to put God in the center of our lives. No matter what we do, we're supposed to put God in the center of our lives. So, in doing so, we see that God puts all these other tribes around based on His order. We have first, on the east side, were the tribes of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. On the south, you have the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. In the middle, again, you have the tent of meeting. You have the Levites also there in the middle, because remember, they were the priests. They were the ones who served the people via what God was telling them spiritually to be doing for the camp. And then you have to the west Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin's tribes. And then lastly, up in the north, you had Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Now, I could do a whole little grid there for you and all that, but hopefully you can kind of understand, and you probably have seen some of those pictures, and I bet it's something you could Google too, if you wanted to Google more so what it looks like. So we'll move on here. But I wanted to point that out to you because it has to do with order. And again, God is all about order. God puts things in place because He wants them to be followed. Sometimes it's not easy to follow God's order. I'll be the first to admit it. It ain't always easy to do what God wants to do, but it is so rewarding. Now, if we jump into chapter 3, excuse me, we find this is where God is talking to the Levites, and He's well, let me just dispel a couple of myths here. You know, we always get this idea, and I think we talked about this too, that the priests, they sat around and all they did was priest, but not everybody could be a priest. Some of them had to do other jobs. And so here we are learning again that only a select few were able to do the rituals. And the other Levites, well, they had other duties. We see this in chapter 3 here. They were ones that had to fill the basins, and they had to clean the stuff. They had to stoke the fires. They played the music. All these type of things. They were all part of that Levitical family, so they all had that priestly blessing on them. But not each one of them could be a priest. Just like not everybody in the church is called to be the pastor. Some of the people are called to serve the pastor. So it's the same type thing. We get this same order here where God is again giving orders to the people, this time specifically in the Levite tribe. Now we jump on, and I want to go to verse 5 here where it talks about the priestly duties, but it can be a little confusing. And so I want to kind of give some definition of terms here. In verse 7, there's this term called perform duties. And it's translated into Shamar Mishmereth, meaning to keep guard. And then later in the same verse we hear this other term that says doing the work of the tabernacle. And that's defined as Abad Bodah, meaning to do the heavy work. So even here, we got two different forms of duties or labor being done, but they mean different things because the different priests, the different people within the Levitical tribe were doing different duties. So I just wanted to bring that out to you. Not that I'm trying to share all my Hebrew knowledge with you, but just kind of bringing some clarity because not everybody did the same thing. So the last part I want to share with you today it comes down from chapter 4. Sorry, I lost my context here. Chapter 4, where we finally see this first census being taken. And the Levites had, the Levites were, well, my notes here say, while all the Levites had been counted, a more specific count was being taken. Now, the Levites had already been counted because God put that in order first. But all the other tribes, they still had to be counted. And so they all came through, and they all were counted one by one, all that type of stuff. And they were counted based on their age. They had to count how many men could go to war, how many people were of the war age, how many people weren't, how many women, how many children, how many men, things like that. So these numbers are in the Bible, and I'm not going to go over all the numbers there with you. I'm going to let you kind of do your own little homework on that. But the reason I'm pointing all this out is because some of these other factors had to do with carrying parts of the tabernacle. They had to, well, I might be getting ahead of myself here, because I believe chapter 4, and I apologize for any confusion, I believe chapter 4 does have to deal with the fact of the Levites being counted because they had to carry certain parts of the tabernacle when they were being moved. So I do apologize again for that confusion. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is not that same one where they counted all the tribes yet. So, but the Levites, they carried the sanctuary pieces. But again, we see that some of them had guard duty. We also see that they had to perform certain tasks, and so all these people had to be numbered and counted. So the physical ability had to of carrying the objects and all that type of stuff, they had to be resting on men who were able to do it, and those men were counted so that they knew exactly how many were going to be in there. So I'm going to leave you with that. That's the end of this Torah portion, and then that goes from Numbers 1:1 up through Numbers 4:20. Again, it's in the desert, and we see there is a lot of action that's going to be happening in the desert here. We're going to learn about Phinehas. We're going to learn about the sons of Korah. We're going to learn about when the spies went in and they started searching out the land. All these type things. And again, this is one of my favorite books. So I apologize if my passion comes out a little bit too abrupt here. But then in some ways I really don't apologize if my passion comes out abrupt, because I love this book. And I hope that it spills out to you and you realize that this book is not for the mathematician. This book is for you. And there are so many good stories that you can learn here. So hopefully God's just going to be working on you as He's letting me share with you. All that to say, Shalom, I'm Dan. Have a great day.